Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, October the 4th, 2024. Today there is a sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Uranus. I know that sounds obscure, a sesquiquadrate. Well, that is a 135-degree aspect. And if you imagine a cake in 8 equal parts, then a sesquiquadrate, or 135 degrees, is 3 of those 8 parts. So it's 3/8 of a circle, and in my book it's an important aspect, and I think that Sun-Uranus aspect does have implications, which I will be discussing in this video, and I'll be discussing some famous people who have Sun sesquiquadrate, or indeed Sun semisquares in their charts, because semisquare and sesquiquadrate are fairly similar aspects. And I'll also be considering some people who might be impacted by today's sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Uranus. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today. Now, just a reminder, if you enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe. So anyway, let's see what's happening today. So here we are. By the way, the thumbnail, I don't know, it's some nebula exploding. It's kind of got nothing to do with Uranus, but I just wanted to emphasize the fact that the Sun-Uranus combination could be quite explosive, potentially. But anyway, I'll be talking about that very soon. So we can see in the chart set for New York today, Friday, October the 4th, that the moon is at 2 degrees Scorpio. So if you're in the Americas, then for much of the day, the moon is in Scorpio. If you're in the UK, Europe, then around lunchtime, very early afternoon, the moon moves from Libra to Scorpio. So from a lunar perspective, it may well be a day of two halves. Certainly in Europe, I think in the Americas, it's sort of most of the day is moon in Scorpio. So you get this transition from Libra to Scorpio, and you get a feeling that with moon in Libra, things were a little bit on the surface. It was quite sort of civilized, and one can have a sort of civilized conversation with moon in Libra, perhaps. And it was, moon in Libra is, it is an air sign, so we can talk about things, and we don't have to get too deep into. We needn't get into them too deeply. But then the moon moves into Scorpio, and that is a lot more intense. There is more emphasis on the emotional side of things, and we may feel that some things are best not to be said because there can be a secretive side to the moon being in Scorpio. Now, one thing doesn't change as the moon moves from Libra to Scorpio, and that is the fact that the moon is in the Via Combustor. The Via Combustor, the flaming path, that part of the sky between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio. And, as I was discussing yesterday, it's a time when things can just happen. We make careful plans. We assume everything's going to work out, but somehow they don't work out. It's not necessarily that the plans get destroyed. It's just that we have to make a last-minute change. And it's just very important that we are flexible. Now, there is another aspect going on today, which kind of has a Via Combustor feel to it, and that is the fact that we have got the Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus. Now, that is, if you like, my headline topic, Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus. I'm going to be talking about Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus in much greater detail later in the video, but perhaps we should see the Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus as a bit of a trigger, because Uranus is moving towards Algol. I mean, Uranus is now retrograde. It's moving back towards Algol. Remember, that is the fixed star, the head of the demon, which is, often associated with unpleasantness, bad events. And so Uranus is getting quite close there. And remember, there was a Mars conjunct Uranus at the time of the first assassination attempt on Donald Trump on July the 13th. And the Uranus was very close to Algol when that conjunction happened, and Mars was sort of providing a bit of a trigger. And so you could say with the Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus, the Sun is perhaps providing a trigger to Uranus's malefic energy. And I'm not saying that Uranus in itself does not have a particularly malefic energy, in my opinion, but when it is conjunct Algol, it can be a bit troublesome. So Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus could just pick up on that. And so that is something that we do have to be very careful about. And it just happens at the same time as the moon is in the Via Combustor. So you put that together and you may get a day which is quite unstable. As is so often the case with these things, it's probably on a more collective level than anything individual, but still we have to be very careful about how we make our plans. And another aspect, not so difficult, is a trine between Venus and Saturn. Venus and Saturn in water signs, I think it's quite useful. I mean, Venus in Scorpio, it's an emotional placement for Venus in Scorpio. Sometimes those emotions can get out of hand, but with Venus trine Saturn, we may get the idea of emotional control, and that we're able to maintain some degree of control over our feelings. And this is something that may well be useful, especially as Mercury is actually square the Venus-Saturn midpoint. So you can see this. So there's Venus, there's Saturn. So the midpoint of Venus-Saturn is around 14 Capricorn. And there's Mercury at 14 Libra. So Mercury is square the Venus-Saturn midpoint. So perhaps in the way we communicate, we can be quite controlling in a sort of an emotional sense. We can express feelings, but we can do it in a way that makes it clear that we are under control. So perhaps we can actually utilize the Venus trine Saturn, especially with Mercury on the midpoint. We can talk about complicated issues, but in such a way that we don't get dragged into something that's completely over our head. And that's the main stuff going on. Just before the moon moves into Scorpio, it does make a square to Pluto. And I suppose moon square Pluto, is relatively intense. It's kind of emphasizes the fact that the moon is just about to go into Scorpio in a way. So the moon in Libra square Pluto in Capricorn has a bit of a feel of moon in Scorpio. I mean, it's not quite the same thing, I suppose, but moon in Libra square Pluto, we can try to be reasonable, but still there's something under the surface that we sort of have to tiptoe around. And some of us may not be too comfortable about revealing our true feelings. Maybe it's not a good idea to reveal all of our feelings. And at the same time, I suppose we might be tempted to brood a little. A little bit of brooding probably doesn't cause any harm, but I mean, too much brooding, when you give the impression that we're really holding something back, that's not something we really want to get involved in. Now, so this chart is for New York. New York, noon, moon is in early Scorpio. So if we look at the chart for Sydney, Australia, and so here's the chart for for Sydney, Australia. For some reason, I put Friday and I put Sunday in parentheses. I didn't mean to put Sunday in parentheses. I meant to put Sydney in parentheses. So it's a chart for Friday. It's not a chart for Sunday. But I meant to write Sydney, and instead I wrote Sunday. So apologies if you live in Sydney for completely misspelling the name of your city. So in Australia, in Sydney, at noon today, the moon is at 25 Libra. So you can see that from an Australian perspective, it's a completely moon in Libra day. And that's not just from Australian perspective. I mean, from the perspective of New Zealand and Eastern Asia, the moon doesn't move into Scorpio until really very much the end of the day. So in that part of the world, you know, you can enjoy moon in Libra for a bit longer. Perhaps it can be more about being on the surface, perhaps civilized conversation, but still the moon does start moving towards a square to Pluto. So although the moon is certainly not in Scorpio if you're in Australia or New Zealand, it is applying to a square of Pluto. And I don't like to use these sort of equivalences. Well, moon square Pluto is rather like moon in Scorpio. It's not like moon in Scorpio at all, but I suppose some of the keywords might be similar, like intense. Okay, but it's not in water signs. But I suppose with moon in Libra, we try to be civilized. We try to keep things on the surface. We want to have sort of a light conversation, and we want to be reasonable. But with the moon square Pluto, we just might be aware that always things are more complicated than they seem on the surface. So let's now turn to the heliocentric picture, and that means putting the sun at the center of the solar system. So here's the heliocentric picture, and we notice that today at noon Mercury is exactly opposition Chiron heliocentrically, and you know there's not much of an orb. Okay, Mercury is a fast mover, but it's within less than a degree in New York time. So with Mercury opposition Chiron, you know, it's what I was saying yesterday. Mercury opposition Chiron is about the way we communicate, and I would have said Chiron can be the maverick. We may feel in terms of what we say that we want to do it in a way that is different. We're not going to just follow the crowd, tell people what they want to hear. We're going to want to say something that perhaps is dramatic, or which demonstrates that we are different, that we have a way of seeing things that is not like other people's way. And I suppose we shouldn't be afraid of being unique individuals, though with Mercury opposition Chiron, the things we say may not always get a favourable reception. People just want to hear what's on the script. And when we move away from the script, I suppose we could get ourselves into trouble. But, you know, some things just have to be said. Now, heliocentrically, there is also a semi-sextile between Venus and Pluto. If you see, there is Venus at 1 degree 8 Capricorn, Pluto at 1 degree 13 Aquarius. So they're 30 degrees apart. So there's a bit of a Venus-Pluto feel to today, and that could be, you know, about feeling that we may be under pressure, but we have to be careful what we reveal. Venus may be concerned about the impact of certain relationships, the impact of getting too close to anyone, but I suppose it could be sort of quite emotionally powerful and intense. So in fact, we get sort of more of the same perhaps with the moon in Scorpio that I was talking about, moon in Scorpio, even moon square Pluto. It it reinforces, I think, the existing sort of geocentric picture. So I don't think that Venus semisextile Pluto contradicts anything, though you could say that Venus semisextile Pluto is a fairly minor aspect. And I suppose I also need to say that the Earth is still making a sextile to Jupiter. It's starting to lose its strength, but Earth sextile Jupiter still provides us with some optimism. And if we make an effort to be optimistic and if we want to make things happen with a positive mindset, then I think we can be successful. But I would have thought that sextile between the Earth and Jupiter is fairly minor. So heliocentrically, I would have said the main aspect is probably that Mercury-Chiron opposition. And so because there isn't a great deal else going on, perhaps that's what we're going to be feeling. So let's now look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, October the 4th, 2024. Okay, so here we go. Aries. Aries, things are slowly starting to get a little more complicated. You know, you've been trying to, be reasonable and sort of to keep things on the surface and not to get obsessed by anything. But there comes a time when you start to realize that actually things are complicated. And as the day progresses, as the moon moves into Scorpio, you're going to feel that some things probably need to be hidden. And I understand that many Aries people don't like to hide things. Why have secrets? But sometimes there are things that do need to be kept secret. And so Aries, if you can exercise a bit of discretion, I think that would be a good thing, because if you talked about everything, if you were upfront all the time, you just might find yourself getting yourself into a situation that you don't fully understand. So Aries, do make it a serious day, perhaps. But I don't think that means it's a bad day. The moon is in Scorpio, which is... there is a good thing about moon in Scorpio, which actually does benefit you. And I probably should have mentioned this in the introduction, that the moon in Scorpio is in a sign ruled by Mars, and Mars is in Cancer. So actually what we've got a mutual reception between the moon and Mars. And that actually gives you a real boost. It does make you stronger, provided you're behaving in the right way. Now, if you are being a typical Aries, just being assertive, saying whatever is on your mind, with reckless abandon, then I'm not convinced that moon Mars mutual reception is really going to help. But if you are serious and fairly intense, and you're ready to keep things to yourself, and you choose your battles very carefully, then I do think that moon Mars mutual reception is really going to help. And also that moon Mars mutual reception is not going to work especially well in a heavily social environment. It's more when you're doing things that you feel comfortable with, when you are in places that you know and understand, when you're doing things that are an essential reflection of who you are. Though I suppose in terms of relationships, that reception, that mutual reception between the moon, mutual reception between the moon and Mars, is going to make you more attractive and quite compelling. So when people get close to you, there will be something, there will be something quite compelling about you. There'll be something about you where people feel they need to know you better. And that is perhaps another reason why you shouldn't give too much away, because the less you give away, the more interesting you will appear. So, if you handle that energy in the right way, then I do think that it can actually be a very good day for you. Now, that this mutual reception between the moon and Mars, it will develop as the day progresses. If you're in America, you start to feel it in the morning. If you're in Europe, it's an afternoon thing. If you're in Australia, well, it's probably going to be late in the day. But in the end, you will still be able to feel it wherever you are. And also because of this mutual reception, I think you're going to be able to deal with unexpected events. Things which at first sight seem to completely floor you and floor everyone else. But if you just keep your cool, you'll be able to understand what's going on. And in fact, you may be able to benefit from it. So if something happens that you just had not planned for, that your first instinct is to maybe even panic, think again. Maybe it's a fortunate turn of events which really could run in your favour. Taurus. Today, Taurus, there is a trine aspect between Venus and Saturn. So we've got Venus is moving through Scorpio, and of course Venus is your ruler, and it is making a trine to Saturn. And this trine to Saturn does give you a certain sense of responsibility. You understand what is expected of you, and also I think you will be inclined to take things seriously, and I think that your serious approach will be much appreciated. And this is especially the case when you're with people. People do matter today. I mean, there's no doubt about that. We've got Venus is in Scorpio, of course, which is your opposite sign, and making a trine to Saturn, and Saturn's in Pisces, which is quite a sociable place, a sociable sign from a Taurean perspective. And also we've got the moon moving into Scorpio, which is your opposite sign, starting to make a conjunction to Venus. I mean, that conjunction between the moon and Venus you're going to sort of feel that tomorrow. But yes, it's true that other people do matter, but everything needs to be structured. Structure matters. Whatever the relationship is, it needs to be understandable. Not necessarily understandable on a mental level, a cognitive level, but certainly on an emotional level. You need to just develop a true, deep understanding of what a relationship is all about. And that can be any relationship. It can be a close relationship that's lasted for decades. It might be someone you meet in the street who, I don't know, maybe they're asking for money to buy a cup of coffee. At least they say it's for a cup of coffee. So that is also a relationship. And I think it's always a good idea to think and try to understand what every relationship is about. And you have to feel it as well. And if you give yourself a chance, that is certainly something that you really can do. And always, Taurus, be ready to ask yourself serious questions. There is nothing wrong with being serious. You take your time. There is no hurry today. to make up your mind. And it does take time. You know, you're a Taurus. Taurus as a sign is a bit slow and methodical. And that's how Taurus works best. And if you slowly and methodically work out what every relationship, what every contact is about, then in the end, you're going to start to get the underlying truth. And it may not just be about relationships, it's just about things in general. When things happen, when you read pieces of news, when you're given information, just allow yourself time to process it. And it's got to be your time. Don't allow yourself to be hurried. That's really important. Do things at your own pace. Gemini. Gemini, you do feel that things are happening out there. And perhaps you feel also that you're not quite part of it. And maybe you're becoming a little curious. You know, you want to know what is happening and how perhaps is it going to impact you. And your thought processes, which very often with Geminis, they like to go all over the place, and I'm saying it as a Gemini, but somehow you keep coming back to the same place. You keep having the same thought and the same concern, and perhaps you can just see, that something is happening. You know it's going to impact you, and you're taking the view that if it's going to have an impact on you, then you need to know what's going on. And so, Gemini, it might be a good time to satisfy your curiosity. But then the question is, how do you satisfy your curiosity? Well, sometimes the best way of satisfying your curiosity is, in the first instance, to do just nothing. Just to stop and think and feel and try to sort of use your intuition to kind of work out, what really is going on. And you need to be systematic about it. Go through the steps. Don't feel that you need to have, all the answers straight away. Now, in general, today does become, I suppose, more, I won't say complicated, but it becomes more serious as the day progresses. This is about the movement from the moon moving from Libra into Scorpio, and as the moon moves from Libra to Scorpio, you start to appreciate, that things are more serious, and they do require more concentration, and you can't just make assumptions. Gemini sometimes do make assumptions, and if you make too many assumptions, things can go wrong. So just slowly try to understand what is happening, and before you get involved in anything, try to think it through or model it in your head. You might feel you want to do something. It might be quite physical. It might be you want to go for a walk, or you want to do some physical work. I don't know, manual labor, something like that. And you think, why not? But do think about what the implications might be. Maybe for your health. It may be that you just do something just on a whim, or you just feel you just want to do it, and it turns out to be more difficult than expected, and it might do you in more than expected. So in terms of physical stuff, don't do something without thinking, and consider how it might mess you up. So if you're, doing something that is physically strenuous, picking a heavy object up, running, whatever it is, just consider the possibility that it might not actually be a good idea, that you have to understand the limits of your own body. And, you know, when you look at the horoscope as a whole, you know, what is happening today, you know, there are no personal social planets in earth signs. Sure, we've got Uranus and Pluto in earth signs, but there's nothing else in earth signs. And the earth signs are the body. And you know, some Geminis can be somehow detached from their bodies. You know, they can regard their bodies as just being, if you like, the instrument of their mind. You know, they can put the mind before the body, and the body just does what it's told. And that can be quite dangerous, because you can push your body too hard, too far, and yeah, you could do yourself an injury. I'm not saying that you're going to do yourself any serious injury, but just do respect your body. And you know, as they say, don't they, that the body is a temple, and that it does need respect. And you have to just consider, you know, what could happen if you push your body too far. And so that's one aspect of today. As far as relationships are concerned, I have a feeling, Gemini, that your approach in relationships is going to be quite serious, and not everyone may appreciate this. Now, the reason for this is that, as I was saying in the introduction, there is a trine between Venus and Saturn today, and this Venus Saturn trine does create the ability to structure relationships and to try to put relationships in some kind of broader structure. You don't want surprises. And Mercury is square the Venus-Saturn midpoint. And so Mercury is your ruler. And so with Mercury square the Venus-Saturn midpoint, there's going to just be something about the way you express yourself that is quite cool and reserved. So I suppose if relationships have a purpose and you're quite transactional about everything, then that's fine. But if you try to get too emotional, and which Geminis don't like, the average Gemini, sorry, that's a complete generalization to say Geminis don't like. What I meant to say is that, you know, Gemini is an air sign, and at times Geminis can be a bit uncomfortable with their feelings. And if you're in a situation where you're expected to be emotional, with Mercury square the Venus-Saturn midpoint, then I'm not convinced that you're going to come over very well. And it's just that you're going to be too cool and too detached. So, you know, this is an area where you perhaps need to understand your limitations. So if you're involved with other people closely, I'm just not convinced that you're going to give the other person everything. I don't think you're going to just be able to let go and dissolve into something. I don't think that's possible. So do respect that and do understand that when you contemplate how you handle the various relationships in your life. Cancer, we've got a sign change involving the moon. The moon does move from Libra into Scorpio, and I do think that this sign change from Libra to Scorpio overall is a good thing. I think that the moon moving into Scorpio is going to make you feel probably more comfortable, because the moon is moving into Scorpio. Scorpio is, of course, a water sign, and Cancer is a water sign. And you'll feel, I think, more in your element, and you may be more prepared to go further. You know, sometimes Cancerians can want to restrict themselves to a particular sphere. They don't want to go further than they have to. And perhaps they're afraid of the risk or perhaps the complications. But now with the moon moving into Scorpio, I think that you can be a little braver. And I think you can be braver just because you're more comfortable with what's going on. And on an emotional level, you're probably more aware of what is going on. Now, this sign change, it kind of depends on where you are. If you're in the Americas, then the sign change happens in the morning. If you're in Europe, it's more about the afternoon. And if you're in Australia or New Zealand, well, that's going to be late in the evening. So it does kind of depend. But in the end, the moon will move from Libra into Scorpio. And we do have at the same time a trine aspect between Venus and Saturn. And I think that Venus trine Saturn is quite nice, really, because Venus is in Scorpio, Saturn is in Pisces, and it's aspecting Mars, which is in Cancer. So there's still this grand trine in water around. This grand trine in water is to an extent starting to break up. Is it? No, not really. I would have said this grand trine in water is still very much there over the next couple of days. And as it involves your sign, I think on an emotional level, regardless of whether the moon is in Libra or Scorpio, on an emotional level, Cancer, you're going to be just very aware of what is happening. You're going to be very present, 100% present, and you're just going to know everything, and you're going to be able to feel everything, and you will have a very good understanding of your limits. And I also think that you're going to be a good judge of other people with this Venus trine Saturn. Venus is a sociable planet. It's trine Saturn. Saturn is ruler of Capricorn, your opposite sign. So with that Venus trine Saturn, you will understand people's good points and their bad points. And if someone is hiding something, I think you'll pick it up straight away. I don't think anyone can pull the wool over your eyes with that Venus trine Saturn. And Venus trine Saturn does also suggest that the right person can be a real benefit to you. So you can therefore make a decision about which people you can trust and which people you want to get close to. And I think that you can very much benefit from their company. Leo, in a way, you're quite enthusiastic today. There are lots of things going on as far as you're concerned. Other people might differ, but it seems that at the moment you can find things going on that other people can't. You just notice it, you just pick up on it, and somehow you can benefit from it, you can enjoy yourself. It kind of doesn't really matter if other people don't want to get involved. It really is up to them, but your enthusiasm may be quite infectious. If you tell people about what you're doing and you try to be as encouraging as possible, then sooner or later you can start to get their attention. Yeah, and I think it is important to be encouraging. It is a time when some people don't want to get involved, they've got their own things to do, but your relentless enthusiasm, I do think, can make all the difference. So don't give up on people just because they don't seem to be interested in what you're doing. If you are assertive, I think that in the end you will be noticed. Though I have to point out that the Sun is making a sesquiquadrate to Uranus. Now, I will be talking a lot more about the Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus later in the video, but this sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Uranus, I believe it's an important aspect. And in some respects, it's quite a difficult aspect because, you know, it's a hard aspect, sesquiquadrate. It's not an easy aspect. It's very dynamic, and Uranus is the planet of, I suppose it's a planet of earthquakes, things just happening that we don't fully expect. So with Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus, yeah, things can happen. You make careful plans, you assume that things are going to turn out in one way, and they end up turning out in a way that is completely different. So Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus, you know, be careful with it. And you know, the Sun, you know, you as a Leo, you know, your Sun is in Leo, that you're someone who likes things to be done in a particular way. But this Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus represent things being done in a way that you're perhaps not used to or you're not expecting. And you don't want to be sort of too brittle. You know, so when something happens that you just hadn't expected, you know, there is some danger that you just freeze or you become completely intransigent. In that case, then that could be a problem. You know, there's some, you know, you need to somehow be able to bend rather than break. So do be able to deal with change and not be freaked out by it. On the other hand, Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus may indicate that you yourself can be an agent of change, that you are not entirely comfortable with the way things are. And I've already suggested at the beginning of this piece that, you know, you can be enthusiastic, you can be wildly enthusiastic, you can be enthusiastic while other people are just disinterested, and perhaps you need to build on that. So if there's something you don't like and you regard things as being a little bit boring, you can perhaps change things through the you know, the power of your personality. And at first you might not get a sympathetic reception, but I suppose if you keep pushing, you may actually start to undermine the walls, break the walls down, and once those walls are broken down, then there is a real opportunity of having change, and it could be change on your terms. And so when we think about this Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus, maybe, Leo, you need to think, which way is that change going to move? Where is the flow? Is the flow going to be coming from outside towards you? In other words, you having to deal with change? Or is the flow going to go in the other direction? Is it going to be you as the person who wants change having an impact on your world? I think in most cases, the latter scenario is probably better. You have an idea about the way you want things to be, and you do your best to make it happen. Virgo, Mercury is your ruler, and Mercury is opposition Chiron from a heliocentric point of view, not a geocentric aspect, but it's a heliocentric aspect. And I'm thinking, Virgo, that you might actually be picking up on this heliocentric aspect. And it may be that you are seeing things differently. Now, if we see Chiron, you know, this minor planet, this comet, if we see Chiron as being the maverick, as someone who wants to do things differently, doesn't want to follow the crowd, then it's perhaps you being different and saying things that people weren't expecting, not doing what you're told, and perhaps having an idea, you don't know where it comes from. I mean, of course, it comes from the universe. That's Mercury opposition Chiron heliocentrically. It comes from the universe. It comes from somewhere out there, and you have this idea, and you realize that, yeah, it doesn't fit with other people's expectations, but still you really want to express this idea, and it's very important to you, and you don't really care how much chaos you cause. And as a Virgo, that sounds a bit strange, because one has this assumption, I don't know if it's a reasonable assumption, we have this assumption that Virgos are sort of quite sensible people, but sometimes Virgos have to create change. Maybe you'll start to be concerned that there's something important that other people are just not aware of. They're almost in their own world, perhaps they're being selfish or just too focused on their little lives, and you feel they need to know about it and they need to think about it. And so, Virgo, that might be a good time for you to sort of present the information, and if that upsets people, well, that's too bad. And the way you communicate, by the way, is going to be fairly matter of fact. I don't think, Virgo, you're going to be particularly in the mood for niceties. There's always this way we're supposed to communicate. We're supposed to wrap everything up in nice words and small talk. But not at the moment, not for you, Virgo. I think you're going to want to be straight and direct. And you may come over as being someone who is somewhat unemotional. Not because you're an unemotional person, it's just that today your style of communication is not going to be particularly emotional, at least outwardly. I think deep down you will understand the emotional dynamics, but you will perhaps choose not to be emotional in terms of what you're saying, not trying too hard to consider other people's comfort and to sugarcoat the message. No, I don't think you're into sugarcoating at all today. And I think actually being absolutely direct is probably the best approach. And talking about communication, the moon is moving from out of Libra into Scorpio, and I think with the moon moving into Scorpio as the day unfolds, you're going to find it easier to talk. It may be a kind of conversation that not everyone is comfortable with, but you will be able to get the words out, and you will understand that that's what matters. It's not how people feel about what you say, it's whether they understand what you say. And today, Virgo, I'm fairly confident that people will understand what you say, and they will get it. They might not like what you have to say, but does that really matter? Libra, it's been nice that the moon has been moving through your sign, but today the moon is moving out of Libra into Scorpio. Quite when this happens does depend. If you're in the Americas, that takes place this morning. If you're in Europe or Africa, it's probably sort of early afternoon, I suppose. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then the moon moves out of Libra sort of this evening. So there is a change, and with the moon moving out of Libra into Scorpio, probably you feel that things are getting a little more serious. You had your chance to perhaps express yourself in a very sort of simple, straightforward way, in a way that you felt comfortable with. And with the moon moving into Scorpio, you perhaps can expect things to be a little more complicated. I mean, just that's simply the way it is. And at the same time, you may not be quite the centre of attention, or the focus may somewhat move away from you, but maybe that's something of a relief. Now, with the moon moving into Scorpio, there are perhaps things that you have recently not been thinking about. Perhaps you thought they could be dealt with later. But now with the moon moving into Scorpio, yeah, things are starting to become perhaps a little more complicated. And I think that might particularly apply if you happen to be working or from a sort of, or you've got a set of ambitions you're trying to pursue, or you've got a career. Just the whole way you progress forward, it's not as straightforward as it used to be, and there may be particular complications that you just have to deal with. Yeah, you don't want to deal with them, but I think now's the time when you can deal with them. Maybe they're connected with money. I mean, maybe not, but money may be an issue, and perhaps, as a Libra, you tried not to upset people, you tried to avoid difficult subjects, but now there may be a difficult subject that just has to be brought up. And yeah, it could have a financial dimension. Now, at the moment, Venus, your ruler, is making a trine to Saturn. And I think that trine to Saturn is actually quite useful if you handle it correctly. Venus represents you, and it represents you trying to make sense of the world, trying to make sense of other people, and also you trying to be taken seriously. And with Venus trine Saturn, I really do think that you can be taken seriously. So, Libra, you might be concerned about how people are going to react to you, particularly if you've got a difficult message to deliver. But I don't think you should be worried, because with Venus trine Saturn, you're really going to know how to present yourself, and you'll be able to focus on the things that matter, and you'll do it in such a way that won't rock the boat. It will be completely reasonable, and it will be clear to any right-thinking person that you not only know what you're talking about, but also that your sense of timing and perhaps your sense of urgency is correct. So I don't think there's any need to feel embarrassed or to feel apologetic in terms of the way you approach people, particularly if you feel that there's something you have to say. Now, at the same time, I'm not indicating that it's going to be a completely comfortable, easy day. I believe that the headline aspect today is a sesquiquadrate aspect between the Sun and Uranus. So the Sun and Uranus are exactly 135 degrees apart. The Sun is moving through Libra, and so the Sun is moving through your sign, and it's still moving through your sign. The Sun moving through Libra. It is relatively comfortable having the Sun in Libra, regardless of whether it's a Sun in your sun sign, or whether it's the Sun is in your ascendant sign or in your moon sign. It depends how you look at these forecasts. But when it's sesquiquadrate Uranus, Libra, there is a reminder there that nothing is entirely simple, and you may try to keep things simple, you may try to avoid complications, but still, Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus, something comes up that perhaps you weren't expecting, or there's some event that you suddenly have to take stock of. Also, one cause of the unexpected may be you yourself. You may perhaps feel that something's not right, or that suddenly you make a few connections and you realize, Libra, that something has to be said, or you have to do something, and it's not something that people were expecting, and you just have to go with it. Sometimes there is an obligation to act, and that Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus may represent that obligation. You just feel something. You feel that the time is right, but you can't leave it any longer, and just something happens. And also, if you feel that something should happen, that something needs to be said, and you don't do anything, you try to pretend it didn't happen, you try to pretend that a set of your own thoughts didn't happen, you just try to look the other way. Still, the unconscious has a way of making things happen. So I don't think it's a time where you can postpone things, especially of a sort of an emotional nature or something where you feel that something needs to happen. If you postpone things, they'll just crop up somewhere else, and they'll crop up in a way that's more difficult for you to control. So I think that you perhaps have to be honest and direct today, and you have to sort of trust yourself. And I think you can trust yourself, because going back to that Venus trine Saturn, it's a very nice aspect, and you are able to be in control. You're able to be in control of your routine, of your time. Your time matters, and you're able to put time limits on everything, and you shouldn't worry about that, because whatever you do, even if it feels that you're upsetting things and upsetting people, whatever you're doing, you can maintain your discipline, you can maintain your balance, and you're unlikely to come a cropper. Yeah, it should work out for you. Just trust yourself to get it right. Scorpio, there are things happening today. I mean, for one thing, the moon is moving into your sign, which is, of course, good news. A lot of people don't like the idea of moon being in Scorpio. But if you're a Scorpio, you should be completely comfortable with a moon moving into your sign. I mean, you are a Scorpio. And so when a moon moves into your sign, you just feel that you've kind of arrived, that you're in the right place. And this sign change kind of depends on your time zone. If you're in the Americas, then this morning a moon moves into Scorpio. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then this evening, perhaps late this evening, the moon moves into Scorpio. But in the end, the moon will move into Scorpio. Okay, if you're in New Zealand, off the top of my head, it actually might be early tomorrow morning, but still the moon will move into Scorpio pretty soon. And so Scorpio, with the moon moving into your sign, you feel a sense of, I think, having arrived, that you're in the right place, that you kind of understand what's going on, that there aren't necessarily too many surprises out there. Or if there are surprises, I think that you will just understand, what they're all about. And I think that you're going to be very good at taking control of any situation you're in, particularly if it's a situation that other people just don't understand, they don't know what's going on. I think Scorpio, actually, you will know what's going on, and you will be helped by the fact that there is a trine aspect between Venus and Saturn. So Venus is moving through Scorpio, and it's making a trine to Saturn. And in fact, Venus is making a trine to Mars, and Saturn is making a trine to Mars. And so with that Venus trine Saturn, you bring a sense of discipline and understanding with you, and also reassurance. So if you find that other people are concerned about something, they're not quite sure what to do, which way to go, then I think you can actually give some very good advice. And once people hear from you that everything is fine, that there's nothing to worry about, then I think these people will, they'll start to relax, and perhaps, they'll take the view that, if Scorpio knows what's going on, then everything is fine. Of course, that does put a little bit of responsibility on you. What if you don't really know what's going on? Well, I suppose you take every moment as it comes, and you just perhaps allow your own outer confidence to create inner confidence. You may start off by not being 100% confident that you know what's going on, but sooner or later you'll get it, and you'll, I think, be able to provide reassurance not just to yourself but also to the people around you. Now, this Venus trine Saturn could have implications for relationships. Venus is representative of another person. Venus ruling Taurus, your opposite sign, and because Venus is in Scorpio, we get the symbolism of someone who is on your territory, because you're a Scorpio, Venus is in Scorpio, Venus rules Taurus, so someone has moved onto your territory. And so that might be a situation where you are the one who is in control, but it might not feel like it. So someone is in your territory, someone actually feels themselves to be quite reliant on you. They may also feel that you know what you're doing and they don't. So don't underestimate how much influence you have. You do have a lot of influence today. And with Venus trine Saturn, you're actually able to use that influence. And if you tell people things, or even if you instruct people, then I think they're going to really appreciate it. People want structure, and you are the person who actually can provide structure. So that's one way of looking at the day. So far, that does put a lot of responsibility on you, but that's not the whole story. You should not forget that the moon, once it moves into Scorpio, is in mutual reception with Mars. So moon is in Scorpio, which is a sign ruled by Mars. Mars is in Cancer, a sign ruled by the moon. So the fact that the moon is in mutual reception to Mars gives you a great deal of strength. So whenever the moon does move into Scorpio, whether it's this morning if you're in the Americas, whether it's this evening if you're in Australia, or New Zealand, as I said, might just be a little bit after midnight, whenever it is, that does immediately give you a lot of strength and a lot of power, and also I think gives you a lot of vision. You start to see things in a wider way. You can see everything, and you can see the opportunities, and you're going to start to feel very, very confident. And I think that you should also have a sense of your own abilities, and these abilities needn't be narrow. I'm not talking about just sort of everyday abilities. I'm talking about abilities that you don't normally give yourself credit for, abilities that may be a little bit nebulous. I mean, I suppose in certain circumstances they could have a sort of an intuitive, spiritual, I don't know, even a sort of a psychic nature to them, or they certainly have a lot to do with your imagination. There's some hidden ability which, perhaps you hadn't been aware of, or perhaps you'd been using it all the time but you hadn't known you'd been using it, and suddenly it's starting to make sense. And it just may be that you realize that you're sensitive, and that you're starting to realize how your sensitivity is actually helping you achieve what you want to achieve. Not just achieve what you want to achieve in terms of material stuff, but in terms of feeling you're doing the right thing, that you understand your own destiny. So don't doubt yourself. Do give yourself credit for your own sensitivity and how much it can achieve, and and how much it can enrich your life. And we may be talking about telepathy, or I know, even clairvoyance, perhaps. So that's something you might want to tune into if you want to. You don't have to. Maybe these kind of things bother you, in which case you don't have to worry about them at all. But it's just something to consider, especially once the moon moves into Scorpio, once you do get this mutual reception between the moon and Mars. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, the moon is starting to move into Scorpio, and with the moon moving into Scorpio, you may feel that you kind of want to withdraw a little. Do you actually have to really be part of it all? I mean, you can be part of it all without being present. And so if you need to step back, you feel you need to step back, then that's fine. There's no problem there. Sometimes it can just all be a bit too much. Though that doesn't mean that the work stops when you step back. Whatever you decide to do, your brain is still very much switched on. And with your brain switched on, I think that there are going to be all sorts of areas that your brain is going to be moving in. I think that you're going to be very inspired, very clever, and also very curious. So in a way, Sagittarius, the less contact you have with the outside world, the more curious you're going to be. And there are going to be many ways in which you can satisfy your curiosity. That just might be sort of research, it might be through thinking, it might be just through insights. And, perhaps you just need a break from other people's rather irritating influence so that you can just think things through in your own way and just, get some powerful and, I think, very useful insights, which I think can really sort of propel you forward. And it's almost like, in order to move forward, you kind of have to go backwards, and that might be that really might be how it feels. And also it does seem that if you want to create lasting stability for yourself, that in a way is a solo exercise. It almost feels like you can't find stability and comfort in a group. I mean, I suppose that sounds obvious, doesn't it? I mean, everyone's got their different perspective, everyone's moving in different directions, everyone's got their own priorities, and it's so easy to forget about your own, your own priorities, the things that are really important to you. And so when you are on your own, or just with people who you're just very familiar with, just things feel just a lot more comfortable, and things do start to make sense. And so that's really the broad theme today. It's perhaps not on the surface exciting, but actually it is exciting. But the excitement is taking place on a sort of inner level. It's about what your mind is doing, where your mind is going, and what kind of things you're discovering. And you get curious, and because you're curious, you ask questions, and you get answers to these questions. And these answers can help move you on, even if on the surface it seems that nothing much is happening. Capricorn, there is a trine aspect between Venus and Saturn, and it's exact today. And I think that this Venus trine Saturn is really quite nice. It's nice in terms of your relationship with other people. Venus is a significator of other people. It's trine Saturn, it's trine your ruling planet. And so this is a time when, certain certain relationships can be strengthened and sort of solidified. So if you've been feeling that there's someone you want to get close to, or you want to know better, now I think is very much a chance to do it. I mean, for whatever reason. I mean, it may be because you just find someone interesting. It may be because you find someone useful. It may be because you find someone attractive. For whatever reason, you want to get closer to someone. I think that you can do it. And it can be done in a way that is completely undramatic with Venus trine Saturn, because Venus trine Saturn, is a very sensible aspect. It's sensible and down to earth. And with Venus trine Saturn, I think that you're going to be able to communicate effectively, not dramatically, just effectively. And you focus on what needs to be said, and I think the other person will reciprocate to what has to be said. And through this process of communication, I really do think that you and someone else can get closer, and you have a sort of a good chance of sort of understanding each other, and perhaps understanding how you can be useful to each other. And of course, I know use sounds, it sounds very utilitarian and transactional, but I mean, let's be honest. I mean, every relationship to an extent is transactional. Every single relationship is transactional if we want to deconstruct it. But perhaps, I'm a Gemini, I like to deconstruct things more than other people, because perhaps I'm over complicating things, but that's just a view. Maybe that's not something you want to think about. Now, I'm not going to tell you that today is going to be entirely wonderful and stable on all fronts, though, because there is a sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Uranus. So Sun and Uranus making a 135-degree aspect. The Sun is in Libra, which is a high-profile sign in your chart. Libra, it's at the top of the chart. And Sun in Libra may represent you trying to make your path through the world. Maybe you as an ambitious human being. Ambitious perhaps in terms of career, but perhaps also ambitious in terms of making sense of what your true destiny is. And so you try to move through the world. Yet with the Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus, there may be a little bit of a hiccup. Something might happen that you hadn't entirely planned for. And your first impulse might be to sort of be disturbed, or even to get a bit angry. But if something does happen today that you find disturbing, I think you need to get it in perspective. What it is perhaps about is about you realizing something. You start to see something for the first time, and you perhaps understand that the way you have constructed your path forward is not entirely perfect. And perhaps you've made assumptions about what you want. Perhaps you've made assumptions about what your destiny is. And, destiny, we perhaps overuse this word destiny. We're all supposed to have this destiny. I mean, I suppose it's really important that we have a destiny, because otherwise, what is the purpose of life? I mean, at least that's one way of looking at things. I mean, I co-wrote an astrology book in the 90s. It was called, it was called Life, Love and Destiny. Yeah, destiny had to be there. But it's not necessarily the case that we are born with a single destiny. It just may be that as we move through life, as we create experiences, I suppose you could say, as we create karma, everything we do has a consequence. As this happens, our destiny is in a state of change. Okay, maybe the broad destiny doesn't change, but the details of that destiny, there's always a sense of renegotiation, and yeah, finding out the impact of our own actions. And perhaps with this Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus today, there may be events which remind you that destiny is not fixed, that there are details to that destiny which have to constantly be reconsidered, and it's a constant process of, well, what do they call it, sort of an iterative cycle. One thing feeds into another, and that feeds back, and there's constant change. And so an event that might come up today may not be an event, it may be a thought, it may be a meeting, just perhaps gives you cause for sort of reflection about what you're supposed to be doing right now. Aquarius, there is a trine aspect between Venus and Saturn. You know, when I was talking to Capricorn, I was telling Capricorn about the Venus trine Saturn, and I was telling Capricorn that I thought that this Venus trine Saturn was quite a favourable aspect, because Saturn rules Capricorn. Of course, Saturn rules Aquarius as well. So this Venus trine Saturn is likely to have some effect on you, and I would have thought that the effect would by and large be pretty favourable. I mean, it's a trine. A trine is a fortunate aspect, and it involves Venus. Venus is the lesser benefic. Venus might not be particularly well placed in Scorpio, but it's in Scorpio. Scorpio is the career, status and ambition house in the Aquarian chart, and with Venus trine Saturn, Aquarius, you can be very focused on what you want to achieve, and I think that other people can be useful. So Venus trine Saturn perhaps is about you being able to link up with people and situations that can really, I suppose, advance your agenda. Now, advance your agenda might sound a little bit too materialistic and sort of power orientated. We can have all sorts of agendas. Agendas needn't be about money and status. They can be about just finding satisfaction in what we're doing, just knowing we're doing the right thing. And I think that with Venus trine Saturn, that's something very much that we can do. Now, Venus trine Saturn might also have implications in terms of appearance, because, you know, when Venus is in that high profile sign, I mean, if you're into natal astrology, I mean, if you're into sort of birth charts and sort of the complications of birth charts, it's rather like Venus conjunct the midheaven, having Venus in Scorpio. It's a little bit more generic from Venus conjunct the midheaven, but, you know, when someone has Venus on the midheaven or transiting their midheaven, there is focus on appearance and what one looks like, and being more aware of what one looks like than usual. And I see the connection there with just sort of mirrors and what one looks like in the mirror. And Venus trine Saturn may be about kind of stabilizing what you look like. I mean, I'm using very symbolic language, and just be aware that when it comes to fashion and appearance and clothes, I that's just not my thing. So I have to sort of stick to the symbolism here. So Saturn is stabilization. It's also your ruling planet. It's trine Venus. So it just may be that you might want to sort of fix on a particular look. You may be perhaps thinking about how you look, what's the right way to look, what's the right way to appear. And, you know, that I suppose it has an impact, you know what you wear. And so Venus trine Saturn may allow you to sort of focus on one thing. So perhaps you've been thinking hard about how you appear, and it's perhaps you've had some doubts in some direction. Is this look better for another? Is one look better for another? But perhaps Venus trine Saturn, if you think about it, you may realize that there is one look that particularly suits you at this moment. And so maybe that Venus trine Saturn could be very useful, and it could just simplify things. You don't have to make so many choices and changes, because Venus trine Saturn just lets you know. It lets you know what is right for you. And with the moon moving from Libra into Scorpio, Aquarius, I do think it is a time when I think you can project yourself very well. Okay, the moon might not move into Scorpio until late in the day, particularly if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but it will get there in the end. And with the moon moving into Scorpio, I think you can project yourself very well, not just today, but tomorrow and perhaps the next day as the moon starts to move through Scorpio, and you can just come over as being a sort of a serious person and someone who is not to be taken lightly. And so overall, Aquarius, I think it seems to be a good day when you may be able to make some decisions about how you want to appear, if that is possible. So appearances sounds a bit trivial, but Venus trine Saturn can sort out some appearance issues. Pisces, things are flowing, I would have said, especially once the moon moves into Scorpio. And over the day, the moon does move into Scorpio. And Scorpio is, of course, a water sign, and Pisces is a water sign. And so with the moon moving into Scorpio, suddenly, we do have a lot of planets in water signs. We've already got Mars in Cancer, we've got Saturn in Pisces, we've got Neptune in Pisces, we've got Venus in Scorpio, and then the moon joins Venus in Scorpio. So as a Pisces, you're in a situation that kind of feels familiar, that you just feel comfortable. You just feel that things are starting to move, that you're on top of things, that you understand things, that you're quite perceptive. I think you're going to be very perceptive today, especially once the moon moves into Scorpio. And of course, it may just be, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, that it's not until tomorrow, or rather the weekend, that you really start to feel the moon in Scorpio, but it happens eventually. So there's no need to feel uncomfortable, and I think that you can probably be fairly confident that you've got it right. Sometimes we make assumptions and we're not sure whether our assumption is correct, but I think right now, you've got it right. I think you do understand what's going on, and it's not just about the way you feel, it's the way you think. And you are, I believe, today going to have some very good ideas. Ideas will just appear almost from nowhere. You'll get some ideas, and the ideas could actually feel really good. Just ideas that really indicate to you that it's clear, and perhaps something you did not fully understand will become clear. It will start to really make sense, and it won't necessarily come through a long process of analysis. It will just happen, and things will click together. And it may be that what we're really seeing is we're seeing brain and heart in some kind of interaction, because there are a lot of planets in water signs, it's true, but there are also planets in air signs. You've got the Sun is in Libra, Mercury is in Libra, Jupiter's in Gemini. So I do think, Pisces, that today my brain and heart are working well together. So it's not just that you have to rely on your feelings. Your brain can sort of analyze these feelings, and it will make sense. So whatever conclusions you come to, I do think that they are going to be almost certainly spot on. And with this moon moving into Scorpio, whenever it happens, as the moon moves into Scorpio, it will start to make a conjunction to Venus, and it will eventually make a trine to Saturn, and the Saturn is in Pisces, and I think that that moon in Scorpio could have a spiritual dimension, and it may just be that you have a feeling that you are on the right path, and perhaps someone is looking after you. Someone is looking after you, provided you stay on the right path. Of course, if we stray from the path, things can go wrong. And, that's perhaps a reminder of the tarot card. I don't really do tarot cards very often, but it's sort of a long time since I really got into tarot cards. But if I remember correctly, the tarot card, the moon, is associated with the sign Pisces. And the message with the tarot card, the moon, is that you've got to stay on the path, because I think that the tarot card often shows some kind of path, and you see things like crayfish and other things as well on this tarot card. And if you stay on the path, you'll be fine, and you will be looked after. Of course, if you leave the path, then all sorts of bad things can happen. The moonlight is not like the sunlight. The moonlight can be deceptive. And so, in terms of spirituality and a sense of spiritual awareness, you will be looked after and you will be guided, provided you stick to that path. And if you're leaving that path, I think you're going to know if you're leaving that path. You will know when you're taking the risk, when it's more than a risk, possibly. You will know if you're doing something inappropriate. So, stick to the path, and everything is working together. The mental side of things is working together. The heart is working with the brain and heart are working together. And there's also that sort of spiritual, I don't know, je ne sais quoi, which is also in the background, which is bringing things together as well. So it looks good. Just stick to the path, and everything's going to be fine. And now I want to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 17, which is following. So this hexagram is pretty sociable. It's about who we have around us, what is our association with other people, and what kind of relationship do we actually have with them. And it's quite a sort of a complicated process. We do have to choose who our friends are. Some people are right for us, some people are not right. And it's kind of interesting that this happens at the same time as we have this trine aspect between Venus and Saturn. Venus is a planet which is about relationships and about how we relate to other people. But Saturn is about limitation and control. And so this may be a side to relationships, is where we have to, we need to choose our friends. And with following, we have to perhaps make decisions about which people we hang out with. We can't be friends with everyone. There are some people who are a reflection of the past. We've got familiar with them. They're not stretching us anymore. They're not helping us achieve our goals anymore. They're just comfortable. And there are other people who are perhaps more challenging, who represent the future. And these are the people perhaps that we need to be focusing on. We have to let go of one group of people in order to bring another group of people into our life. So there are some choices that we have to make, and we also have to consider the possibility that some people are just hanging on to us, that they are maybe following us, but we have to consider what exactly is their motive. You know, they may not really care about what we say and who we are. They may just want something from us, or they may feel that somehow our influence is going to help them achieve their aims. So do think very carefully about the motives of people who are following you, who are around you, because sometimes these motives may not be entirely honourable. I don't say honourable, but their motives may be entirely selfish. And they don't really care about us as a person. And if we're being followed by people who don't really care who we are, they only care about our influence or our power or our money, well, that's not the kind of following that we really want to attract. And I think that, you know, we do have to consider, you know, where do we stop? You know, we don't need to have too many followers. You know, we don't have to perhaps have too many friends. There are certain people who are surplus to requirement. And I think that links back to the fact that we've got Venus trine Saturn today. And Venus trine Saturn is about controlling Venus. Venus is about relating, and Saturn is about saying, well, you can't relate to everyone. You've got to have limitations there. And we have moving lines here, and that means that this hexagram does move, and it moves to hexagram 48, which is the well. So the well represents something which is always there. And perhaps there's a reminder that, you know, we shouldn't be too obsessed about who our friends are, whether people like us, whether people don't like us, whether we are following them, whether they're following us. And the real question is, are people always going to be there for us? Are we always going to be there for them? Because that's what the well is all about. The well is about permanence. You know, groundwater should always be there, of course. At least in America, cities seem to have complete contempt for aquifers and groundwater and so forth. But before the modern era, okay, climates can change and so forth, but groundwater should always be there. The well should always be there. It's a resource we can always rely on. So perhaps when we're making up our mind about which people we need to have in our lives, ask ourselves, is this person always going to be there for us? Are they going to be a resource that we are always going to be able to tap into? And at the same time, are we prepared to always be there for someone else? And that might be an important yardstick. So if we're considering what kind of a relationship to have with someone, ask, can we give that person constancy? Can we be there for them? Maybe we can't be there for them. It just might not be practical. And in that case, we have to be honest about the situation. So I think the well is perhaps giving us an idea about how we judge people and how we judge ourselves. And it's all about, can we offer permanence? Can they offer permanence? If so, then that is a relationship that we should hang on to. If we can't offer permanence, and they can't offer permanence, if they can't be a permanent resource, if we can't be a permanent resource, then maybe this is a relationship that perhaps we should let go of. And now it's time to look at this aspect between the Sun and Uranus, which is a Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus. So let's have a look at this aspect for today. So here's the Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus. Here's the chart. So this is set for Westminster in the centre of the government district of London, I suppose. So there's the Sun at 11:49 Libra, and there is Uranus at 26:49 Aquarius. So you can see that the Sun and Uranus are exactly 135 degrees apart. And the Sun-Uranus as a pair can be quite explosive. The Sun is a positive, masculine planet. We all know that the Sun is a fireball. And it's a sort of, what is it? Sort of a permanent hydrogen bomb. And you have a sesquiquadrate to Uranus, and that really stimulates the Sun, and it can create explosive events. And also we shouldn't forget that Uranus is getting close to Algol, the head of the demon, and that is difficult. It's explosive. It can represent things that are really, really quite unpleasant, acts of evil, perhaps. That could be Uranus conjunct Algol. And so what's happening is that the Sun is triggering Uranus, and so that makes me think that it may not be a particularly stable day. I mean, on a sort of a personal level, we might find that just there are events that we don't feel fully prepared for, and there may be a certain amount of difficulty there and uncertainty. And on a sort of a global level, you can associate that with just events, just things happening. And in terms of how I deal with the Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus in this video, what I first want to do is I want to look at 2 people and 4 events which have Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus in there. Now, when I say Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus, that's 135 degree aspect. That's 3/8 of a circle. Now, the Sun semisquare Uranus is a 45 degree aspect. So a sesquiquadrate 135 degrees is like 3 slices of a cake. If you've got a cake with 8 slices, 3/8 of the circle, or you've got 1/8 of a circle. So I'm lumping together the 45 degree aspect with the 135 degree aspect. And I just want to look at some people and events. So let's look at 2 people who have got Sun semisquare Uranus. So one of these is Emmanuel Macron. So there's Emmanuel Macron. You can see his Sun he's the president of France, of course, and he has got the Sun at 29:25 Sagittarius, and he's got Uranus at 14:50 Scorpio. I mean, he's got Moon opposition Scorpio. He's got the Sun sesquiquadrate the Moon. So it's part of a really quite massive combination in his chart. But just if we look at that Sun semisquare Uranus in isolation, here is someone who has a sense of drama, who likes to do things that are unexpected. For example, you look at what he's been doing with suddenly deciding to call an election a few months ago, and you think of all the chaos that caused. It was just before the Paris Olympics. He likes to be in control. He likes to have a sense of drama, and he announced that maybe recently France might send troops to Ukraine, and then he had to backpedal on that. So that could be something about how Sun semisquare Uranus works, and it can be very stubborn. He has an idea about the way things should be, and it's also quite brittle. So Sun semisquare Uranus, you want things done in a particular way, and if things aren't done in a particular way, you get annoyed. And I think there may be a certain amount of arrogance to Sun semisquare Uranus. This is my way of doing things. At least that's how it perhaps works with the case of Emmanuel Macron. Now, someone else who has Sun semisquare Uranus is Kamala Harris. So Kamala Harris, there's Kamala Harris's Sun, 2748 Libra, and it's semisquare her Uranus. I think it works in a slightly different way with Kamala Harris, because she's a woman, so the Sun is perhaps a male planet. Maybe it's more projected, but I think with Kamala Harris, with Sun semisquare Uranus, okay, maybe someone who attracts events, but it might also be someone who has a very fixed way of the way things should be. And yeah, I think like Emmanuel Macron perhaps is a little brittle, but perhaps she lacks the intellectual flexibility of Emmanuel Macron, and maybe this is why she's found it so difficult to have lots of interviews, and how she backed away from that sort of Al Smith dinner in New York, because she couldn't handle the spontaneity of it. And that just could be how Sun semisquare Uranus works. And it may be someone who is very stubborn. We don't perhaps see her stubbornness in terms of her public persona right now, but apparently she's someone who's very difficult to work with. I think Emmanuel Macron sounds like he's a bit of a nightmare to work with, but she has a very high turnover of staff, and so that might be how the Sun semisquare Uranus works. Now, there are 4 events I want to look at. I mean, I'm not saying that we're going to see events like this today, but it just gives us an idea of what kind of events happen when the Sun is making a semisquare or a sesquiquadrate to Uranus. Now, you remember the Baltimore Bridge crash. Remember when that boat smashed into that bridge in Baltimore and caused massive amounts of damage? I think someone was killed, weren't they? And at the time of that accident, the Sun, you can see that the Sun was semisquare Uranus. Now, of course, the Sun was semisquare Uranus all over the world, and so why did it happen in Baltimore? There were other things that I looked at, I think, like lunations and so forth. At the time of that Sun semisquare Uranus, notice how the Moon was making a quincunx to Jupiter when that boat went into the bridge in Baltimore. And so, a Sun semisquare Uranus does represent some kind of an accident. This was quite a substantial accident, certainly if you lived in Baltimore. And it can be about explosions. The bomb plot, when there was an attempt to kill Hitler on July 20th, 1944, in what is now Poland. I think it was East Prussia then, but there is the Sun. Look at the Sun, conjunct the North Node. And it was, the Sun is reasonably close to a semisquare with Uranus. So Sun semisquare Uranus, of course, there were a lot of explosions during the Second World War. Every single day there were big explosions. Every single day people were being killed. But I suppose an explosion which came very close to killing Hitler, even by the violent standards of the Second World War, was exceptional. And so that might be a manifestation of how a Sun semisquare Uranus might work. An explosion. And of course, we're going to get explosions. There are going to be explosions. There have been explosions every day in Ukraine. There have been explosions every day in Gaza. But you could say, well, there may be an explosion that is more notable than usual. And I suppose in this case, there were people were killed, but it didn't actually work. Hitler survived. And I suppose perhaps the tragedy of this, assuming you once thought it was a good thing, it would have been a good thing if Hitler had been killed, is the Moon. The Moon was at 2955 Cancer, so the Moon was void of course. Maybe if that explosion had happened when the Moon was in Leo, it would have been okay. And but it was void of course, so in this case, nothing happened there. And another event, a tragic event, was the death of, the murder of Sharon Tate. So Sharon Tate was murdered by the Manson gang, and I think that this was a big event because in some respects, I don't know, in some respects it was the end of the 60s, wasn't it? The 1969, it was then the dark side of the 60s manifested in all its horror with the murder of Sharon Tate. And there is a sun at 1631 Leo, and Uranus was at 132. So in fact, there was an exact Sun-Uranus semisquare within 1 minute orb of Sharon Tate's murder. And so that is a very unfortunate manifestation of Sun-Uranus. It was certainly a shock event. And a final event that took place with Sun hitting Uranus was the blowing up of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline in the Baltic. This had a devastating impact on the German economy because it was a pipeline providing Russian gas to Germany, and it was blown up on September 26, 2022. I think the general consensus seems to be that it was the Americans that blew it up. Now there's this story about, it was Ukrainians. It was some Ukrainian team that did it independently. I have my doubts. I mean, blowing up a pipeline like this is really quite difficult. I mean, this is deep under the sea in the Baltic. You would have really needed to know what you were doing to blow that pipeline up. So I take the view that it was the Americans that were involved with it, whatever anyone says. And that talking about blaming on the Ukraine, that's a kind of a way to deflect criticism. Now, at the time of this explosion, when the pipeline was blown up, here we have the sesquiquadrate. So the sun was at 254 Libra, and Uranus was at 1830 Taurus. So the Sun and Uranus were in sesquiquadrate at the time of the Nord Stream 2 explosion. So you can see that those four events in their own way have a Sun semisquare or sesquiquadrate feel to them. And I want to finish by just quickly looking at a few people who may be affected by this Sun sesquiquadrate Uranus. It's in the sky. I've already noticed this with these people because Uranus is transiting these people. So what's happening with this? There are 6 people I want to look at. And so what's happening in all these cases is they've got a Uranus transit to a personal point in their chart. And what's happening is that the sun is acting potentially as a trigger. So that's how we often use transits. We see the Uranus, a planet like Uranus, as being giving the general time. And when you have the sun making an aspect, then that perhaps gives you maybe the day of the event. So let's see who we've got. Well, we've got our old friend Justin Trudeau. So I recently pointed out that Justin Trudeau has Uranus on his midheaven. I'm afraid I haven't been following Canadian politics very closely, if at all. But I understand that with his coalition, it is difficult holding things together, and he has got Uranus currently very close to his midheaven. And so what's happening is, if we just put the two things together. So here's Trudeau. So you can see Uranus is very close to Trudeau's midheaven. It's not exactly on his midheaven, but then the sun comes along at 11:49 and makes the sesquiquadrate to his midheaven. So it may be that today there is a Uranus on the midheaven event, and it doesn't really matter perhaps what the nature of the sun is. The sun is like acting as some kind of trigger. So perhaps we need to look at what's going on in Justin Trudeau's life. Now there are 3 people who I've talked about who all have their Marses, who all have their Mars at about 26, at 26 Leo. And those 3 people, I've mentioned this before. One of these people is, of course, Donald Trump. Donald Trump has his Mars at 26 Leo, so he's got Uranus square his Mars. the Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister. He has also got his Mars at 2645 Leo. Again, Uranus is squaring his Mars. And British Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, I don't have her time of birth, she's got her Mars at 26 Leo. So I don't know what Angela Rayner, Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump have got in common, but they've all got Mars at around 26 Leo. All of them have got Uranus, transiting Uranus, square their Mars, and now with the Sun making a sesquiquadrate to Uranus, today is the trigger. So those three people, we need to watch out. Remember, Uranus is on Algol, and with Trump, he's had 2 assassination attempts. I mean, I think there continues to be danger for Trump. I'm sure he's completely protected, and that any opportunity for someone might have to take a shot at him has passed. But still, Trump needs to be careful today. And of course, Netanyahu, well, we know what Netanyahu's doing. I mean, it's just more of the same, isn't it? If he's got Sun sesquiquadrate his Uranus, Netanyahu is going to be in the mood for doing stuff. He's not going to be in a particularly conciliatory mood, I don't think. And finally, 2 people that I don't really have any interest in, but still, I thought I would look at them anyway, because it's quite interesting. So, Taylor Swift. Now, Taylor Swift, everyone goes on about her, and she's having a relationship with this football star called Travis Kelce. So let's look at their charts side by side, and I've already done this, but Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. Okay, so Taylor Swift. So Taylor Swift is, she's a Sagittarius. So there's Taylor Swift, and that's her chart in the middle. That's Travis Kelce's chart, outer wheel. Now notice this piece of synastry they've got. Taylor Swift's Mars is at 2653 Scorpio. Travis Kelce's Venus is at 2637 Scorpio. So they've got an exact Venus-Mars synastry between them. That pairing is what brings them together. That is the compulsive element of their relationship. It's very powerful. I mean, I've looked at this aspect before, and I think there is a certain problem here with this, because her Mars is in Scorpio, so she projects this Mars. Mars is a male planet, so she's looking for someone who represents Mars in Scorpio. So she projects it onto his Venus in Scorpio. And likewise, his Venus in Scorpio represents the woman he's looking for, and he sees it in Taylor Swift's Mars in Scorpio. But these 2 projectable planets, it feels like 2 missiles firing at each other and then hitting each other and not reaching their target. It's somehow weirdly unsatisfactory, but completely compulsive, because the projection in both sense arguably fails, even though it feels at the time compulsive. Anyway, that's quite a complicated situation, and I don't know if I've necessarily verbalized that very well. But the point is that Uranus is at 2649. So 2649 Taurus. Is that right? I got that right? I think so. Yeah, 2649. 2649 Taurus. So Uranus is opposition, that key point in their synastry. The key point. And maybe Uranus has so far has brought them together with all that excitement and in the bright lights and all that kind of thing. But the Sun is picking up on it as well. So the Sun, sesquiquadrate Uranus, is hitting Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce as the key link between their two charts. Now, we're not going to know immediately how they're experiencing this transit. And it could be quite serious. It may not be easy. And if I were to advise them, I would have said, if they're really into this relationship and maintaining this relationship, I would advise them not to have any contact with each other at the moment, over, today, yesterday, tomorrow, while that Sun is making that sesquiquadrate Uranus. I would see this as potentially being quite a dangerous time for them. I mean, dangerous in the sense of dangerous being dangerous perhaps in terms of a relationship. Although, from Taylor Swift's point of view, she's got Uranus opposition her Mars, she's got Sun sesquiquadrate her Mars, so she perhaps needs to be careful, perhaps on a physical level. Mars can be about accidents, and I don't know what she's doing, but I think it's certainly at the very least, it's going to be quite a stressful time for her. And I think, I'm not talking about physical danger, not kind of danger that Donald Trump is in, but I suppose if she's very physical and dances around, all that kind of stuff, I suppose she can slip and sprain an ankle or whatever. And I suppose, with Travis Kelce, his Venus is being activated, so that could be a bit of a problem. But I'm sure we might never find out what happens, but I thought I would point that out. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. And if you are not subscribed and you enjoyed the video, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. And thanks very much again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.